Let's talk about one of the weirdest and deadliest disasters in American history. It happened in Boston back in 1919. But this wasn't an earthquake, it wasn't a fire. No, this was a tidal wave of hot, industrial molasses that literally tore a neighborhood apart. So how on earth did this happen?
Okay, picture this. It's a pretty mild January afternoon, right after lunchtime. All of a sudden, the entire neighborhood is rocked by this sound. But it wasn't a train. It was the sound of a 5-story tall steel tank holding millions of pounds of liquid, literally ripping itself apart at the seams.
And this is what was inside. 2.3 million gallons of molasses. To put that in perspective, that's enough to fill more than 3 Olympic-sized swimming pools. And this wasn't the kind of stuff you put on pancakes. This was the raw material for industrial alcohol, a crucial ingredient for making munitions for World War I.
Now, when that tank failed, it didn't just spring a leak, it exploded. The molasses burst out in a massive wave, estimated to be traveling at a terrifying 35 miles per hour. Just imagine that, a sticky, brown tsunami moving faster than most people could even run.
And the human toll was immediate, and it was brutal. 21 people lost their lives. Another 150 were seriously injured. This wasn't just some strange industrial accident. This was a full-blown catastrophe that completely leveled a community.
So that brings us to the big question, right? How in the world does syrup cause this level of destruction? Well, the answer is a fascinating mix of forensic science and a truly infuriating story of corporate negligence that basically made this disaster inevitable. Okay, so let's get into the forensics of it all, the how. The science behind this collapse is a tragic story, and it really comes down to 2 key culprits: the steel tank that was supposed to hold the molasses, and the bizarre physics of the molasses itself.
So culprit number 1 was the tank's material. It suffered from something engineers call brittle failure. Now think about it like this. A good piece of steel, when you put it under too much stress, it's supposed to bend or stretch first. It gives you a warning. Brittle steel? Nope. It doesn't warn you. It just shatters instantly, catastrophically.
And when you look at the evidence laid out here, it's just shocking. The steel walls were literally half as thick as they should have been. The manganese content, that's the stuff that gives steel its strength and ability to bend, was way too low. All this meant the steel would become brittle at 59 degrees Fahrenheit. Well, on the day of the disaster, it was 40 degrees outside. That cold Boston air had turned that massive tank into a ticking time bomb, basically made out of glass.
So we've got a brittle tank, a total disaster waiting to happen. But what about what was inside? This is culprit number 2. You see, molasses is what's called a non-Newtonian fluid. It's a fancy term, but all it means is that it doesn't behave like water. Under the incredible pressure of the collapse, it became sheer thinning. Its viscosity just plummeted, and it started acting less like thick syrup and more like a fast-moving river. And this right here shows the 2 deadly phases of the disaster. That initial wave was incredibly fast and destructive, a 35-mile-per-hour current of liquid that just demolished buildings. But then, as that wave slowed down and hit the cold winter air, its viscosity shot right back up. It turned into a thick, inescapable trap. People who were knocked down by the initial blast were then trapped in this stuff that was basically like quicksand. So we know how it happened from a science perspective. But here's the thing. It never, ever should have happened. Let's shift gears to the human element, because this was a disaster built from a perfect storm of greed, haste, and just plain negligence.
This timeline really tells you the whole story. World War I kicks off, creating this massive demand for alcohol to make weapons. So the tank gets rushed into construction, managed by a guy who had 0 engineering experience, all to meet a shipping deadline. And then, the final straw, Prohibition. The 18th Amendment was going to take effect the very next day, so there was this frantic rush to produce every last drop of alcohol. Profit and speed were the only things that mattered.
I mean, the tank was practically screaming for help. From the day it was filled, it groaned and rumbled. Molasses was always leaking from the seams, so much, in fact, that kids in the neighborhood would literally bring pails to collect the sweet drippings. The site manager, residents, they all warned the company, United States Industrial Alcohol, over and over again, and their concerns were just completely ignored.
And here is the absolute kicker. The company's solution to all the groaning and the obvious leaks? You're not going to believe it. They painted the tank a dark brownish red. Not to fix the problem, but to make the leaks harder to see. The level of cynical negligence is it's stunning. So, in the wake of all this destruction, the fight for justice began.
And this wasn't just about cleaning up the sticky physical mess, it was about figuring out who was to blame and making sure this could never, ever happen again.
The company's legal defense was just as shameful as its engineering. They were facing this massive class action lawsuit, but instead of taking responsibility, they tried to deflect. They made up a story about a bomb plot by Italian anarchists, preying on all the anti-immigrant and Red Scare paranoia that was going around at the time. But the court auditor, a man named Colonel Hugh Ogden, he wasn't buying it for a second. He methodically just tore their claims apart. Instead of a bomb plot, he found a total lack of engineering review. Instead of sabotage, he found a long, documented history of ignored warnings. His final verdict was crystal clear: wanton negligence.
The company was ordered to pay out $628,000 to the victims and their families. Today, that's the equivalent of over $10 million. And it was a landmark case, one of the first times a major corporation was held fully accountable for its impact on public safety.
And this all leads us to the most important legacy of this strange, sticky tragedy. Because that fight for accountability, it didn't just end with a check. It fundamentally changed how we build our world.
I mean, from our perspective today, this is almost unbelievable. This massive 5-story structure weighing 26 million pounds, looming over a dense neighborhood, and it didn't require a building permit, no city inspection, no professional engineering oversight, nothing. This disaster changed everything. The court's findings became the blueprint for modern safety laws, first in Boston and then across the country, requiring that plans be stamped by a professional engineer, forcing companies to file those plans with the city, mandating that you actually test large containers before you use them. These basic standards that we all take for granted today were born directly from the wreckage on Commercial Street.
And really, that's the ultimate takeaway, isn't it? The Great Molasses Flood is this powerful reminder that the invisible web of regulations that keeps us safe, building codes, engineering ethics, corporate accountability, it wasn't just invented out of thin air. It was written in the wake of tragedy, a legacy paid for by the 21 people who lost their lives to a wave of molasses.